an out-of-towner for Wall Street as an investor?
Well, what's the benefit of being an out-of-towner as opposed to being in Wall Street? I worked in Wall Street for a couple of years, and I like. I've got my best friends actually, and I'm on both coasts, and I like seeing them, and I get ideas when I go there. But the best way to think about investments is to be in a room with no one else and just think. And if that doesn't work, nothing else is going to work. And the disadvantage of being in any kind of a market-type environment, and Wall Street would be the extreme, is that you get overstimulated. You think you have to do something every day. I mean, the Candler family paid $2,000 for this company, and that you don't have to do much else if you pick one of those. And the trick then is not to do anything else, even not to sell it in 1919, which the family did later on. So what you're looking for is some way to get one good idea a year, and then write it to its full potential. And that's very hard to do in an environment where people are shouting prices back and forth every 5 minutes and shoving reports under your nose and all that. Because Wall Street makes its money on activity. You make your money on inactivity. I mean, if everybody in this room trades their portfolio around every day with every other person, you're all going to end up broke, and the intermediary is going to end up with all the money. On the other hand, if you all own stock in a group of average businesses and just sit here for the next 50 years, you'll end up with a fair amount of money, and your broker will be broke. So his activity he's like a doctor who gets paid on how often he gets you to change pills. I mean, basically. If he gives you one pill and it cures you the rest of your life, he's got one sale, one transaction, and that's it. But if he can convince you that changing pills every day is the way to great health, it'll be great for him and the prescriptionists, and you'll be out a lot of money, and you won't be any healthier. You'll be a lot worse off financially. So you want to stay away from any environment that stimulates activity, and Wall Street would have the effect of doing that. I used when I went out to Omaha, I'd go back about once every 6 months, and I'd go back with a whole list of things I wanted to check out one way or another, companies I wanted to see, and I would get my money's worth out of those trips. But then I'd go back to Omaha and think about it. Yeah.
How should an investor evaluate owning shares of Berkshire Hathaway or Microsoft when they don't pay dividends to the investor?
Yeah, well, the question with Berkshire Hathaway, the question was about evaluating Berkshire when it doesn't pay any dividends, and it won't pay any dividends either. It's a promise I can keep. All you get with Berkshire, you stick it in your safe deposit box, and then every year you go down and fondle it. You take it out and you fondle it, then you put it back. And I mean, there's enormous psychic reward in that. You don't underestimate it. But the real question is whether we can keep retaining dollar bills and turning them into more than a dollar at a decent rate. And that's what we try to do. And Charlie Munger and I have our money in it to do that. That's all we'll get paid for doing. We won't take any options. We won't take any salaries to speak of or anything. We'll ride around in the plane. But that's what we're trying to do. It gets harder all the time. The more money we manage, the harder it is to do that. And we would do way better percentage-wise with Berkshire if it was 1/100th the present size. But it is run for its owners, but it isn't run to give them dividends, because so far every dollar that we've earned and could have paid out, we've turned into more than $1. It's worth more than $1 to keep it, and therefore it'd be silly to pay it out. Even if everybody was tax-free that owned it, it would have been a mistake to pay dividends at Berkshire, because so far the dollar bills retained have turned into more than $1. But there's no guarantee that that happens in the future, and at some point the game runs out on that. But it is the goal of, I mean, that is what the business is about. Nothing else about the business do we judge ourselves by. We don't judge it by the size of its home office building or anything of the number of people working around it. We've got 12 people at headquarters. We've got 45,000 employees at Berkshire and 12 people at headquarters, 3,500 square feet, and we won't change it. So we will judge ourselves by the performance of the company, and that's the only way we'll get paid. But believe me, it's a lot harder than it used to be. Is there anything way in the back? Because I want to make sure I'm not missing people back there that haven't called. Okay, then we'll go to the. Well, how about way over there on the aisle? Yeah.
What makes you decide investments reach its full potential?
I missed this. What made me decide to invest? What?
One of your investments has reached its full potential. As you said earlier, that you.
I missed the last part of it. Reached its full potential. Well, ideally, you buy in businesses where you feel that will never happen. In terms of, I mean, I don't buy Coke with the idea that it's going to be out of gas in 10 years, or 15 years. I mean, there could be something happen, but I would think that the chances of that are almost nil. So what we really want to do is buy businesses that we would be happy to own forever. It's the same way I feel about people who buy Berkshire. I want people to buy Berkshire that plan to hold it forever. They may not for one reason or another, but I want them at the time they buy it to think they are buying a business that they're going to own forever. And I don't say that's the only way to buy things. It's just that that's the group I want to have join me, because I don't want to have a changing group all the time. I measure Berkshire by how little activity there is in it. If I had a church and I was the preacher and half the congregation left every Sunday, I wouldn't say, "Oh, this is marvelous because I have all this liquidity among my members." There's terrific turnover. I would rather get a church where all the seats are filled, every Sunday by the same people. Well, that's the way we look at the businesses we buy. We want to buy something that we're really happy to own virtually forever, and we can't find a lot of those. And back when I started, I had way more ideas than money, so I was just constantly having to sell what I thought was the least attractive stock in order to buy something that I just discovered that looked even cheaper. But that's not our problem really now. And so we hope we're buying businesses that we're just as happy with 5 years from now as now. And if we ever found some huge acquisition, then we'd have to sell something maybe to make that acquisition. But that would be a very pleasant problem to have. We never buy something with a price target in mind. I mean, we never buy something at 30 saying if it goes to 40, we'll sell it, or 50 or 60 or 100. We just don't do it that way any more than when we buy a private business like See's Candy for $25 million. We don't say to ourselves, if we ever got an offer of $50 million for this business, we'd sell it. That's just not the way to look at a business. The way to look at a business is this going to keep producing more and more and more money over time? And if the answer to that is yes, you don't need to ask any more questions. Yeah, way back there.
Those same principles in mind, what was your motivation for taking a piece of Solomon and similarly long-term capital? And how did you come up with the valuation?
Well, Solomon, like I said, I went into that because it was a 9% security in 1987, September 1987. The Dow was up 35% that year. We'd sold a lot of stuff, and I had a lot of money around. It looked to me like we were never going to get a chance to do anything. So I took an attractive security form in a business I would never buy the common stock of. And I went in because of that, and I think that's generally a mistake. It worked out okay finally on that, but it's not what I should have been doing. I either should have waited, in which case I could have bought more Coca-Cola a year later or thereabouts, or I should have even bought Coke at the prices it was selling at then, even though it was selling at a pretty good price at the time. So that was a mistake. On long-term capital, we have learned other businesses that are associated with securities over the years. And, I mean, one of them is arbitrage. I've done arbitrage for 45 years, and Graham did it for probably 30 years before that. And that's a business, unfortunately, I have to be near a phone for, and I have to really run out of the office myself, because it requires being more sort of market attuned. And I don't want to do that anymore. So unless a really big arbitrage situation came along that I understood, I won't be doing much of that. But I've probably been in 300 arbitrage situations at least in my life, maybe more. And it was a good business, perfectly good business. Long-term capital has a bunch of positions. They got tons of positions, but the top 10 are probably 90% of the money that's at risk. And I know something about those 10 positions. I don't know everything about them by a long shot. But I know enough where I would feel okay at a big discount going in, and we would have the staying power to hold it out. We might lose money on something like that, but the odds are with us. That's a game that I understand. There's a few other positions we have that aren't that big because they can't get that big, but they could involve yield curve relationships or on the run, off the run governments or things like that are just things you learn over time if you're around securities markets. They're not the base of our business. Probably on average, they've accounted for 0.5 percentage point of our return a year, or 3/4 of a percentage point a year of our return. They're little pluses.